So, the weather has changed, but has the mood changed? I'm here once again at the AXA Training Centre after Arne Slot's pre-match press conference ahead of the League Cup semi-final first leg against Spurs, and obviously it's been a bit of a tempestuous week for Liverpool after the draw with Manchester United and all the fallout, particularly surrounding Trent Alexander-Arnold. So it was a fascinating watch to see exactly how Arne Slot would react, and to be honest the answer was yes and no. We still got some jokes from Arne Slot, we still got some frivolity, but there was certainly an amount of steel and a level of tension in the air that we haven't experienced much so far this season. We asked about some of the players who may or may not be coming in, some of those who have missed the previous game. Obviously, we spoke a lot about Trent Alexander-Arnold, we spoke about the defence, we spoke about exactly what it takes to play so many games, a team like Liverpool at the top of the league. We even spoke about social media posts. We're going to go through most of that, if not all of it, back at the lab. It's a delight to be back in the warmth and comfort of the lab. I have to say that was a morning that can be characterised as both dicey and icy. For those of you who aren't aware, I had a few train cancellations, which meant that I cut it very close to not making it in time for the start of the press conference. As it turned out, I wasn't the only one that was delayed. The press conference was put back, almost like the universe had my back. So I was there and able to get my question in and able to be here to do all this for you. Now, as is traditional on this show, we start up front with all the injuries and contract news. Contracts, no change. Surprise, surprise. Injuries, Dom Szoboszlai hadn't been into the building. Yesterday was a recovery day, so they didn't come in to train, but he hadn't been in. He was expected to be in today, but Slot does not expect him to be available to start against Spurs. It'll be interesting to see if he gets some minutes off the bench and whether or not that continues for the Accrington game ahead of him being fit to start against Nottingham Forest, or at least available to start against Nottingham Forest. With Joe Gomez, it was said to be a few weeks away. It's kind of like an aside, it wasn't necessarily a full update, so we don't know how many weeks or a few. It could be 2, it could be 5, but as it stands, Joe Gomez is the only long-term absentee, which, considering where we are in the season, is fantastic news. Now, on to our top takeaways. Now, top takeaway number 1 is kind of connected to those things I just mentioned. There was no team hints today. Aside from Szoboszlai, Arne Slot was keeping his cards very close to his chest when it came to revealing who may be in and who may be out against Spurs. So he was asked questions regarding Jota, regarding Kelleher, regarding Colin Bradley, and whether or not they're all fit to start. And he didn't really answer any of those questions. He kept it all very vague in terms of his team selection. He even went so far as to correct Julia Bold, who was a bit of a misunderstanding between how he answered the question and whether or not that meant that players who weren't often in the starting lineup were going to be in the starting lineup for this. He would not confirm or deny either of those things. He did say, though, he has picked his team, and we're just going to have to wait and see. Now, there's been some debate amongst the fan base over what level of priority should be placed on this game, whether or not Liverpool should just not really care about it because we're all gung-ho for the league and the league is all that's important. Well, there's 2 schools of thought here, really. Number 1, you're in a semi-final, so if you're in a semi-final of a cup, you should want to win it regardless. And number 2, and this relates to a question that I almost didn't ask, we've seen this Liverpool team, when they have too much rest, it can actually work against them. I think they're so used to playing a game every 3 days, being in Europe, being in all these competitions, that helps them keep up their rhythm. So I wouldn't be surprised to see quite a few of the first team feature in this game on Tuesday, particularly knowing that there's the game on Wednesday, knowing that there's the cup game against Accrington at the weekend, where many of them can get their rest ahead of that massive game at Nottingham Forest on the Tuesday. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see a mix and match team, maybe some of the starters, maybe a few in there. I mean, there's a reason why Slot was so keen to keep his cards close to his chest. I guess we'll have to wait and see tomorrow to find out what that reason was. Top takeaway number 2, no excuses for drop points. Now, Slot was asked a variety of questions within this one. He was asked about the scrutiny on the players, particularly around the contracts or things like social media posts by certain strikers with certain pictures and all of those things. He was asked about the relentless schedule of playing in all 4 competitions and referenced last season where it all kind of seemed to got on top of them towards the March and April time. He was also asked about the January transfer window, whether or not he felt like there was enough depth in his squad or resources to be able to see him through this whole season. And in typical Slot fashion, he kind of batted away all of them. I mean, the social media post, he said that he doesn't concern him. He hasn't got time for that. And to be honest, I kind of believe him on that score. In terms of the comparison to last season, how he dropped off, he said he can't really compare this season to last season, something he's been very consistent on as well. And with the January transfer window, he said that, I said I was happy with the squad in summer. It would be weird for me to change my mind now, but the club are always looking in the market. Now, I think with that last question, he didn't really want to give anybody anything to make a headline out of, which will, I'm sure, disappoint some of you out there who are always desperate to see new players come into the squad. But I don't think it necessarily means Liverpool aren't going to be active in this window. I think what it just means is that it's not a big consideration for him. None of those things are big considerations. He mentions also what I mentioned earlier about the fact that so many of the squad are fit right now, and he said that they'd earned the right for him to not be concerned about bringing players in. They'd earned the right to say that these players are good enough to continue for the rest of the season based on what they've done so far. Now, all of this feeds into what I was saying before. There is no real excuses being given for Arne Slot, because all of those things could be seen as reasons why it's tough to win football games. None of that seems to enter into Slot's world. The only thing that he makes it clear that it's difficult to win football games is the quality of the opponents. The only time that Liverpool don't win games is because the opponents have done something good. Now, I think that that's kind of a better way to look at things from a management point of view, from a coaching perspective, where he's talking to his players. Look, don't let those outside noises come in. Don't let excuses creep in. I've already spoken in previous videos about how that's a difference from the way that maybe Enzo Maresca has done things at Chelsea. I would also add in Arteta and Guardiola, who have both been very keen to stress their injury list, almost to the point where they are allowing their own squad to see it as an excuse. Slot has no time or no truck for any of those things. As I said, the only thing that he's going to allow people to say with the reason for drop points are the quality of their opponents. Now, he may value the quality of some opponents higher than some people out there, particularly when it comes to Manchester United. But he referenced Spurs, who were playing as well. We referenced Newcastle, who are doing very, very well at the moment. And I'm sure ahead of the Nottingham Forest game, looking forward to that press conference, by the way, he's going to reference the same. They're a team who have won 6 in a row. We will get onto them in the future. But as I said, this is a no tolerance policy of Slots. So don't worry about those other things. Just concentrate on what you do and what you can do, and hopefully the points will follow. And you know what? It's doing everyone well so far. Top takeaway number 3. Arne the entertainer. Now, most of you will have noticed that I've not explicitly mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold so far in this video. And yes, there were plenty of questions about him, but I don't really feel like feeding that hive any longer. I think it's one of these things where people talk about, is this going to become a distraction? Is this going to become a distraction? Well, one way for it to become a distraction, if everybody's always talking about it. So you can find out everything you want to know about that elsewhere. I'm going to concentrate on what I think is important. Now, there was a side note from one of those questions which I did want to bring up, because he was asked about how Trent was feeling in the fallout of the Manchester United performance, and Slot did the thing that he always does, and I absolutely expected him to do, which is to widen the question from an individual to the group. He does this whether he's talking about good things, whether we're talking about bad things. He also did it with a question that's surrounding Cody Gakpo. Rather than just focusing on the one player, we want to focus on the group. Whether they're getting praise or whether they're getting blame, they are doing it all together. They are all as one. However, there was one little nugget that fell by the wayside. I'm not sure everyone really picked up on when he was talking about that Manchester United game. And that was around the idea of entertainment. Now, he said that it was an eventful game against Manchester United, and he had plenty of texts from friends of his saying, oh wow, what a game. And Arne Slot said that he saw that as part of his responsibility as well, to make sure games were entertaining and exciting. Now, that's not necessarily what I'd have expected to hear from him. I might have expected to hear it from Ange Postecoglou, to be honest, but not him. If you think about the way Liverpool have played under Arne Slot, the composed tempo, the possession-based control, that seems to be the antithesis of the kind of harem-scarum exciting games for the neutral that we saw under Klopp. I mean, this felt like one of the Kloppisms that he was actually trying to eradicate. So again, it does surprise me to hear him talking about the idea of being entertainers and how important that is, and him almost as a custodian of great football. But then we have heard him reference this before when he's spoken about the last time we played Spurs and his admiration for Ange Postecoglou and their attacking football. So maybe it's just a repetition of that line of thinking. But really, as Liverpool fans and journalists and people of a Liverpool persuasion, do we want entertaining games for the neutral? I don't think we do. I think most of us want a game that's 2 or 3-0 on 65 so we can shut it down and everyone else turns off because it's boring, because Liverpool have won and the opponents know that Liverpool have won and they're not really trying that hard. That's what most people want. So the idea that we would want or be pleased with harem-scarum, entertaining, backwards and forwards roller coaster football is kind of surprising for me. Now, I don't know whether this was just a throwaway line that I've focused too much on, that doesn't really mean what Arne Slot thinks it means, or doesn't really mean what I think it means. But it was interesting to hear him say it, and it might be something that I try and pick up with him at a later date. Speaking of things that I'm going to pick up with him, it's time for my question. Now, my question was more about the defence. Now, this is a question that I've almost asked on a couple of occasions, and unfortunately Liverpool have conceded a couple of goals again, so it meant that I could ask it on this occasion.
Hi Arne, only Arsenal have conceded less goals in the league than Liverpool this season, but of the 19 we have conceded, 11 of those have come in the last 6 games. Now obviously there's been some defensive injuries and a red card in that time, but you always talk about defending with all 11 players. So do you think there's been anything systemically that's changed, or maybe even opponents have started playing you differently, which has caused some of these more goals to come in?
A lot of questions, so I can answer a lot of things. But I've said in the beginning of the season, when we've conceded 1 or 2 chances, sometimes we were a bit lucky, or it was the quality from the goalkeeper that we didn't concede. I don't think we concede many more chances than we did when we kept the clean sheets. We had a clean sheet against West Ham when they hit the bar and the post, so that is a bit of football as well. It's also about the teams you face. If you go away to Newcastle, I think that's a difficult away game for everyone. So there we conceded 3, we conceded 2 against Fulham, with the red card included, of course, and conceding goals against United, which is a very good team in the league. I know everybody is looking at the league table, but that is so far off from the quality they have that is part of a season as well. So during a season, sometimes the other teams has 3 or 4 chances and they don't score, and sometimes out of 2 chances they do score their goals. That has happened quite a lot recently. What I still see also when we concede the second goal against United, I think we had more bodies in our 18-yard box than them. And Robbo tried to do everything, made a sliding tackle, but the ball went through his legs and went in. And it went through the legs of Ibu. So as long as we bring more bodies inside the box than the other team, then still you don't like to see you conceding a goal, but I see the same work rate we had as in the beginning of the season. And that is what's necessary, and then it's also sometimes about the quality you face, which is something happened against United and Newcastle, because they have attackers that don't only score against us, also to against other teams.
So yes, Arne Slot was consistent in a couple of ways. First of all, he mentioned the fact that my question was actually 3 questions and probably a bit too long. We'll get part of that. But what he did is that he mentioned something that he said earlier in the season. So when everyone was praising the defence and how wonderful it was and what had he done to turn it around, he mentioned a lot of the time that there was luck involved, that we were relying on good performances from goalkeepers sometimes, and sometimes there were times where our opponents didn't really take advantage of its situations, or maybe there was a lot of luck involved in keeping those clean sheets. And now we're in a situation where maybe that natural variance has returned in the other direction. He referenced the fact that in some of those games, namely the Leicester game, opponents scored with their one and only shot on target, or one of very few shots on target. I think you could say the same in the Fulham game. There was the very first shot on target, both Fulham and Leicester scored with. And then he mentioned, obviously, something you returned to previously, the quality of the attackers. He mentioned Newcastle and the fact that they've scored lots against everybody, which is true. He mentioned the quality of the Manchester United attackers and said that they scored against everybody. Don't remember Martinez scoring that many goals, but I digress. But the point being is that, once again, this is an example of Arne Slot not getting too high when there's praise, not getting too low when there's criticism. He said that he didn't think that there were many more chances being offered up by his side now than there was previously, which essentially is the most important part. If it felt like opponents were getting more and more shots on our goal, then yes, that would be a systemic problem. That would be something that he'd have to really address. But in his mind, that's not the case. He's very relaxed about this whole situation. I think it helps the fact that Liverpool aren't getting beat. Even in the times when they are conceding 2 goals, they are still very hard to beat. But when I said 11 goals conceded in the last 6 league games compared to 8 in the first 12, that is a very big difference. We'll have to wait and see whether or not getting more of the defenders back, Konate and Bradley in particular, Tsimikas as well. Tsimikas' influence in those clean sheets earlier on in the season has kind of gone under the radar, so it'll be interesting to see if he comes back into the side and what difference that makes. But once again, I think this is another example where Arne Slot is not necessarily looking beyond the fact that other teams are sometimes good, and they're allowed to be good. And as long as we're better, then that's all that matters. Again, what he says to us in the outside world and what he says to the players on the training pitch may be slightly different. But hopefully, Liverpool can get back to getting those clean sheets, get back to maybe shutting down games on 65, and getting back to bringing the focus back towards football and playing good football. Because I don't know about you guys, but that's what I want. I also want to say a big thank you to all of you for watching, as ever. Don't forget, you can read my stuff on Substack. You can read my stuff in my column on This Is Anfield. You can see me on the Anfield Rap. You can see me on the Late Challenge podcast. I'm literally everywhere. And we'll be back here again on Friday. See you soon.